Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome back to the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson. It's NFC East time, Sam.
It is.
It is. NFC East time. We've hit the entire AFC, all four divisions. Check out their review wherever you're listening to this podcast. The people they're loving it all month. They go back. It's evergreen. It's what we call evergreen. So people are going back listening to all of the divisions. We're going to get into detail on every single team. So today it's all about the NFC East, Sam. A division that was kind of the laughingstock of the league last year, but I don't know if it's warranted. I think just some quirky stuff happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was the Eagles and the Cowboys were still good last year, pretty, reasonably good. And the Cowboys, for years, have been dealing with this like underachieving label, so we expect them to be even better this season. So yeah, I think they're good. You notice we got your cough button back?
Yes.
This is all
Now you
upgraded.
can't hear me.
Now we have a cough button, and we have this thing, which is.
Can we explain why we have the shock absorber?
We have the shock absorber
You
because
gonna get fired?
Possibly. The boss, Chris Collinsworth, he's a table banger, right? So if he's in a meeting or a podcast, he likes to hammer the table with his hands. It's just like it's a reflex.
Thank you for at least explaining what's
Sure.
happening here.
Yeah, well, when they chop that up into a social clip and it's just he's a table banger, that's how I get fired.
Yes.
The quote taken out of context, that's how it gets done.
Yeah. NBC's calling. A lot of stuff's happening here.
So he was on the forecast with Eric and George, and every time he hammered the table with his hands, it was like somebody was dropping a grand piano down a flight of stairs. So we have to get the shock absorber for the microphone, which has been certified by Tyler as it works, but it might not be Chris-proof.
Yeah, we'll have to find out.
So for you and me, it should be good.
Next time Chris is a guest on the podcast, we will test it out.
Yeah.
Before we dive into the NFC East, it's a big week.
Table banger.
It's a big week at PFF. You are the best at naming stuff in PFF.
Well, it's better than you anyway.
Two things are happening this week. College football subscription model is finally out there. And then the preseason.
I think it's called a model.
I mean, it's a model. It's like I'm using the business term.
The subscription.
Unfortunately, the subscription's out. College football subscription and magazine. And the preseason 2021 NFL draft guide. It's all happening. Go to pff.com for more information. The college football subscription people have been asking for basically since we started doing this in 2014. When are the grades going to be available? When is this stuff going to be available? It's all there. College football grades and premium stats. And you actually get 25% off with the promo code CFB25. That's CFB25. And you get 25% off, and you can just, start up your college football subscription. I figured we'd do this at some point, but here we are, about 6 years after starting the college grades, and decided this is the time to do it. There's a college football magazine, which is fantastic, the grades pages, premium stats. If you guys have the elite package for the NFL, NCAA premium stats is identical, and you also get NCAA Green Line, and this entire promo ends on my son's birthday next Monday, the 24th.
Well, that'll make it easy for everybody to remember.
Everybody remember that. August 24th, if you guys want to send cards to Harry, he'll be 5. So
the design of the preview magazines are pretty incredible. Like, it's amazing what can happen when you actually have people doing this as a full-time gig as opposed to between data games that they're grinding. Back in the day when we were doing our preview magazines. But these look absolutely spectacular. The guys with the design work, Andrew Russell, I know, is a big part of this. They look amazing. Like, they're as good as anything out there. They're better than anything out there because they got better data.
So go check it out, pff.com. We'll talk more about the preseason draft guide at some point if I remember. But that's also out, and that's pretty awesome as well. So let's get into the NFC East, starting with the Dallas Cowboys, Sam. And they are a team that all of our numbers essentially suggest The offense is better than the defense. Therefore, we feel a little bit better projecting them forward. Plus, when you go back and look at last season, they are the team that probably outperformed their actual record. And so you could say, you know what? They probably were a 10 or an 11 win team as far as how well they played on the field. If they play that well this year, we should expect them to at least compete for the division in the NFC East.
Yeah, I think that's the story for Dallas, is that this is a team for years that's underachieved, and the blame for that has finally, I'm not suggesting it's accurate or otherwise, but eventually the blame for that has been placed to the door of Jason Garrett, and he's lost his job, and now there's a new coaching staff in there, Mike McCarthy. But the idea being that the coaching staff has been the cap for how good this team has been. The talent has been better than they've shown for a number of seasons now. So logically, the conclusion to that is, well, now this season, by doing nothing else, they will get significantly better just because of that change. And it isn't like they did nothing else because, oh, by the way, in the first round, they got CeeDee Lamb, who most people thought was going to go in the top 10 somewhere. So, I think the offense has a chance to be really, really good. And, as an aside, the Dak Prescott negotiations ended up in stalemate. He's, on the franchise tag, but he could have a career year in this offense because we've seen that Dak Prescott goes essentially as his supporting cast goes, and this might be the best supporting cast he's ever had.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about Dak in a minute. I am fascinated by this story that is Mike McCarthy coming in as the new head coach and essentially saying, as a former offensive-minded coach and play caller, Mike McCarthy said, I need to learn the playbook. That is rare for coaches to come in and say, I'm not bringing my stuff. I have to learn what's already there because I trust Kellen Moore. I trust Dak Prescott coming off of his most productive season and the supporting cast pretty much coming back.
Did they settle on that? Because I
think
heard
so.
that they were changing the language to McCarthy's, but then he was saying that he was the guy that needed to do the most adjustment. So I don't know if there's
maybe it's that part of the quote that I was relying on the most.
I think they've changed terminology to McCarthy's terminology.
But that doesn't that's a language. Though.
Yes, but that's significant. Changing the language of your.
My point is he's not necessarily implementing his style like Kellen Moore's calling plays.
But you made it sound like he was basically just leaving the whole thing to. So I think they
Thank you for correcting me.
Structurally changed the system, but you're right that he's leaving a lot into the hands of Kellen Moore.
Right. And Kellen Moore was ranked as one of our highest play callers last year. Again, Dak, from a production standpoint, had his best season. Wasn't his best graded season, but it was still one of his better ones. And Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and now you add CeeDee Lamb. I will say I'm back and forth on this because I keep reminding myself that Randall Cobb had over 800 yards as the slot receiver last year. So, CeeDee Lamb, if he's the number 3, or maybe he just overtakes Michael Gallup as the number 2. That's possible with CeeDee Lamb's talent. Can CeeDee Lamb, but say as the number 3, though, can he get over 800 yards? Not that you need to, but will he produce as well as Randall Cobb? I don't know if there's necessarily an upgrade offensively, but they should at least be as good as they were last year, right?
The Kellen Moore thing, I think, is exciting because I think he is one of the better young minds in the NFL in terms of offensive scheme and all this kind of stuff. He started the season sort of on fire with this hyper extremes of all the things that the data says you should be doing more of, right? Motion, bunches, all this kind of stuff. And then it cooled off as the season went on. Everyone's like, well, maybe.
And against better teams as well.
And that's a big part of it. But I love the point that the boss, Chris Collinsworth, made on the forecast, which was he showed growth over the season. I forget the game he was referencing, but there was one game where schematically Moore just got beat, right? He rolled into the game. They had the perfect game plan for it. Could have been.
Because they got demoralized. No, they demoralized the Rams. I'm sorry. That was the other way around.
And then, so whatever it was, the game, he was just out-coached, right? Yep. They had the answer to whatever it is he wanted to do, but then from that point on, he understood how to defeat that, right? He went away, figured out how he got beat, and then the next time a team turned up with that blueprint, he was able to defeat it. That level of growth in season, not just, 1 year to the next, but week to week, seeing, oh, hell, they had the answer to what I want to do. They stopped me, and now I've figured out 2.0.
Right.
The fact that he had that level of growth within the season, I think is huge.
And that's what I think we should be looking at from Kellen Moore. It's almost like RG3 has that great rookie season. Well, what happens when the league adjusts to you? What happens in year 2? I think this is like the rookie quarterback.
It's the Sean McVay thing.
The
That's
McVay thing. I mean, the ability to evolve and adjust. So, like, good start by Kellen Moore. Showed some growth last year, as you said. Let's see it again going forward. A big loss on the Dallas offensive line is Travis Frederick retiring. He wasn't himself last year, but we're talking about Frederick and Zach Martin and Tyron Smith. Those 3 guys. I mean, the pinnacle of their respective positions. Yeah. And you're losing Frederick now, and you have to replace him with Joe Looney or 4th-round pick Tyler Biadasz.
Yeah, it's interesting because, so you say, obviously losing Travis Frederick is huge. The guy is one of the best, arguably the best center of his generation, was on an incredible run before he got the illness that derailed him. But that means because of that illness, he missed the whole season and then came back and was not himself and therefore decided, look, I can't play like the all-pro that I was, so I'm walking away. But that means that they haven't had that guy for 3 years now. Like 2017 was the last time real Travis Frederick was playing for the Dallas Cowboys. So what they've lost is, an imitation version that was bad enough that the player himself is walking away from the game. And I'm not saying he was bad. He wasn't. He was, better than average. But the point is the guy that they actually have to replace is not nearly as hard to replace as the all-pro that we think of him as, because they haven't had that guy for a couple of seasons now. So the idea that a guy like Joe Looney or Tyler Biadasz can come in and replace 2019 Travis Frederick, I think is very achievable.
Yeah, and then I think if you look at the rest of the offensive line, La'el Collins at right tackle took a huge step forward last year, by far his career season. And I think our old friend Connor Williams, he's heading into year 3 at left guard. He's been just okay, but when offensive linemen tend to show improvement, it is year 3. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Connor Williams take a step forward. Tyron Smith hasn't really been the same guy that he was 4 or 5 years ago, but he's still, again, among the league's best. So I think we're looking at the Dallas offensive line as top 5 once again.
They also have Cam Irving is going to be the player that hangs onto a roster for like 15 years on the basis that he's versatile, and he's versatile in the way that people use it incorrectly in terms of I can do a lot of things badly. Yeah. I can do a lot of them though. Like I can man 4 different roster spots for you to the level where you don't want me on the field. But I can four of them. That's worth some coins.
He's played some football.
Hand it over.
He's the guy that you say a lot of starting experience.
Yeah. So and
played some football
and a lot of different positions. Like I can get on the field for you at all 5 offensive line spots. Every single one of them will be a liability, but I can man them all. He's on Dallas now, but that dude is going to cling onto a roster for like a decade, based off nothing.
So the line's going to be good, despite Cam.
Not because of Cam.
The receivers, really quick. We've seen Amari Cooper. I think I always go back to this whole the quarterback gets elevated by a supporting cast and all that stuff. Amari Cooper, we've seen, as I mentioned on the other podcast, and we've seen him elevate Derek Carr. We've seen him elevate Dak Prescott. This offense has been night and day more productive since Amari Cooper has showed up.
Can you square that with the criticism that goes towards Amari Cooper sometimes? Rex Ryan went off at the deep end on it. But in terms of
he called him a diva or what?
No, he called him. What did he call him? A bum? Or he called him something pretty personal.
Prima donna.
But so he's clearly not. He's not Julio Jones, right? He's not an elite receiver. He's not in that very top category of the best in the NFL. And people have pointed out there are some games where he just doesn't show up, and he does disappear a little bit. But clearly, as you said, he makes a night and day difference to the offense when he's out there, and not just one offense, like multiple different offenses, multiple different quarterbacks, of whom they're quarterbacks that I think have shown they get elevated by their supporting cast. Like he's not elevating elite quarterbacks, he's elevating average to above average quarterbacks to being something better. How does he have that big an impact on an offense and yet still somehow remain a little bit below the elite receivers in the NFL?
I think because... So, if there is something where, hey, you know what, when you do run into Stephon Gilmore, it's not going to be great. Or when you do run into a great corner, it's not going to be great. But the fact that Michael Gallup, who we think is really good, and I think when you have a Michael Gallup type of receiver, he's a pretty good route runner, he's got pretty good ball skills, he's going to catch the ball, like he does all these things pretty well. You do need a number 1 to allow Michael Gallup be the number 2. Yeah. So I think that's where we would put Amari's value. When you look at just EPA per play, since he showed up on about 900 plays, it's like 100-something EPA, and then on the previous 400, it's about 2. I mean, so just by perspective, it's
nuts.
It goes from below average passing offense to like top 5 passing offense. So even though, I mean, I think it's a lot. Is it the Kirk Cousins factor? Like, Kirk Cousins is good all the time, and there's value in being Kirk Cousins and beating bad offenses
Key
and this
moments.
and that. But at some point in key moments, you're not. But it's still more good than bad.
Oh, of course.
Right? And it's still, when you look at Dak last season, I mean, he went from being ranking in the 20s to ranking top 10 and being the second most valuable quarterback by our numbers.
It's just weird to me because I can't see a reason for it, for why he isn't, I don't want to say better than he is, but why he isn't at a Julio Jones level, right? Because he is a great athlete. He's a great route runner. He's physical and big and fast enough. He's got all of the things. It's just that sometimes it doesn't seem to show up.
I think he lacks the Julio physicality. Obviously.
I mean, he's not Julio, but nobody's Julio, right? Julio's the closest thing to Randy Moss that the league has in terms of I'm bigger, faster, stronger, and jump higher than you, and there's no way that you can match up with that. But he's the only guy that has that, right? Everyone else is missing something. But in terms of like he's a plus athlete in all of those areas. He's not he's not. So DeAndre Hopkins doesn't have a couple of those, right? He's not as fast. He's like, you're faster than he is. Cooper is probably better than you at most of those areas in terms, if you're like your average defensive back, even your average number 1 corner, he's probably better at most of those areas. But quick aside, did you see the weird video that they had of him and Michael Gallup doing a catching drill?
No.
Jugs machine over there, right? Firing him a ball. You know the way you see every now and again they practice one-hand grabs?
One-handed backs, yeah.
So they were doing combined cooperative one-hand catches, right? So if you and I are the receivers and the ball's coming in like this, they would both grab it like
they're
this.
both catching
and
it?
they're both catching like either half of it. And then, so like after they caught it, they would like try and wrestle grip strength, see who could pull it away from each other. But
it's a good drill.
They did. It's cool. But they fired like, the video's like maybe 10 passes long. They did it in one hand, then the other hand. They didn't drop any of them. I'm amazed that the two people trying to catch the same pass one-handed can coordinate to the point where they can.
That's good.
I would have thought that just two guys going for a ball would lead one to get there first, and just, you know what I mean, the timing would be off.
You're trying to catch half the ball.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good drill.
It was kind of crazy that they didn't drop it. It was also, it shows.
Is CeeDee Lamb ready for that, or does he pair with like Devin Smith or Cedric Wilson?
I don't know. But it also reinforced how insanely sticky those NFL receiving gloves are. Like,
oh, you're always going to give credit to the gloves.
I'm just saying, like,
if I had those gloves in the IAFL,
like those things stick, and the thing is not coming out of those gloves.
Anyway.
I mean, whatever about me, but like, the boss isn't happy.
Oh no,
about
Chris
those
isn't
things.
happy about that.
That guy had to catch.
Chris had no gloves.
Right, that guy had to catch when it was just your hands.
Right, playing in like 59 below weather, like the '82 AFC Championship. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, Dallas should be fantastic from a receiving standpoint. CeeDee Lamb adds the guy that could play on the outside. I think they'll use him in the slot, and they'll use him to create yards after the catch. Lamb's skill set, I just said he had. Remember, we watched him on film. Like, he doesn't feel fast, but he's running away from people.
Yeah.
He doesn't feel slippery, but he's breaking tackles. I just think he's got a good feel for where defenders are. Therefore, like, he knows leverage. He knows, hey, you're up here. I'm going to spin this way. We saw that against Baylor. He just knows how to create yards after the catch. So there's a lot of value that I think he's going to add to the offense. Starting as the number 3, but I could see him maybe stealing a lot of targets from Gallup.
Absolutely. He's a great test case of this thing of, why is this working, right? And and a lot of times you watch in college and you say, this shouldn't be working the way it is, right? And you automatically default to, well, it won't work at the NFL level where the athletes are bigger, faster, stronger, and better. But a lot of the times it does. So I fell into this trap watching Antonio Brown, back in, where is he, Central Michigan? And you're watching him, you're like, there's no way this will function at the NFL level, right? Because all he's doing is like
but it did.
a small side cut, and all these like MAC defenders or wherever they were are just skittling all over the field. Like, that doesn't work at the NFL level. The Cam Newton thing in college, you're like, well, he's just bigger than these guys. That's not going to function at the NFL level. Turns out he's bigger than the NFL players as well, so it did. But Lamb feels like the next one of these, and all the way through watching his tape, I kept wanting to be like, why are all these Texas defenders just falling over when they hit him? Like, it shouldn't. an NFL player should make that tackle. Therefore, it's not going to work. But after being burned twice, at least, I'm now starting to default on the idea of, well, it's going to work until I see a reason for it not to.
Right.
So I don't know why it's functioning yet, but I'm going to work on the basis that until I see NFL defenders bringing him down every time, I'm going to assume he's still going to be able to break tackles after the catch at the NFL level.
So the top three is fantastic. I think our boy Devin Smith, he had like that one deep post last year. Like, there it is. There's that deep speed. He would be a fantastic just speed number 4 if they trusted him and he stayed healthy and got through the season.
There are some teams that should be making phone calls trying to get Devin Smith.
All about Devin Smith. All about it.
I mean, like, whatever about, the guy that we like. But seriously, like, he showed enough last year, and the thing that he's good at is valuable enough. Plus, first-round pedigree or whatever. It's not like he's a nobody. Like,
I know.
There are teams out there that
They take every first-rounder.
Right. There are teams out there that do not have good receivers that should be making a phone call to see what that would cost.
So in our preseason rankings, we called Dak a Tier 3 quarterback.
Yes.
Which I think is fair. I'll explain in a minute.
But he's going to look like a Tier 1.
Number 3 offense. This is why. When you have a Tier 3 quarterback, and then this is your supporting cast. Number 1 wide receiver group that we gave him. Number 3 offensive line. Number 3 running backs. So having Zeke, having Tony Pollard, the only real weakness there is tight end, where, honestly, not to trash Jason Witten again, when we said Foster Moreau is way better than him, or he might be better than Foster Moreau. But, like, Jason Witten was obviously slow and not helping much last year. Blake Jarwin at least has a little bit more athleticism, but it's not a great tight end group. They were the team, like, if David Njoku was really on the trading block, if they really wanted to put the finishing piece on this offense, adding another athletic weapon like an Njoku would be great. I think they'll be okay without a great tight end, because you do have Zeke, who can do some stuff out of the backfield. You have Tony Pollard, who can play running back / wide receiver and be difficult to cover. So I think the offense is going to be really good. Again, calling Dak a Tier 3 quarterback is essentially based on this. The Tier 3 quarterback description is the guy that, when he has it all right, when he has that great supporting cast, it gets elevated.
Yeah.
In his 4 seasons, 2 years of top 10 PFF grades, 2 years at like 19-20. So he has been dependent on what's around him, which is fine. I also think with Kellen Moore, they tap into his skill set a little bit more. You've got his rushing ability that you can use in the red zone. Like, Dak is a difficult quarterback to defend because he makes a lot of nice plays and he's got these nice receivers to throw to.
I would say he is going to have a career year and look like an MVP candidate this season because of how good the situation around him is. And therefore, there's going to be a bunch of people calling you an idiot for putting him in Tier 3, even though it's exactly what you were saying. I also think Dak and Wentz, there's a couple quarterbacks who are like a year or 2 away from a couple top 10 rankings of PFF grades where they're, okay, you feel pretty good about them in Tier 2. Like, they are now the second tier of quarterback, which over the last decade has been Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Andrew Luck, and honestly Russell Wilson has been that until we just elevated him to Tier 1, which I think took the way he played the last 2 years for that to happen. So if you told me a year from now, you know what, Dak is in the Ben Roethlisberger ranking of NFL quarterbacks, like, okay, that's fine. It's not crazy, but I need to see it again from him. What about the defense?
Okay, defensively, there are question marks in the secondary. It is a fascinating group of defensive linemen now that they've added Everson Griffin to that mix. DeMarcus Lawrence has been fantastic, but you've got Gerald McCoy in there, Dontari Poe. Like, you've just got a who's who of old school veterans coming through here, most of whom are still pretty good. Like, Griffin can still produce. Gerald McCoy can still produce. I think they're going to be solid up front. And DeMarcus Lawrence is the guy there. He's been really good, even though his sack totals have fluctuated up and down since his peak year in 2017. Like, he still wins quite a bit.
Don't forget they also got Aldon Smith.
And Aldon Smith is in there as well. I mean, we don't know what you're going to get from Aldon Smith, but I think Everson Griffin's a much better – you feel a little bit more reliable, I think, from Griffin, even with some of the issues he's had. He's a little bit more reliable than because we just don't know what we're getting from Aldon.
Yeah, I think there's reasons to be quite optimistic about Aldon Smith, assuming like the off-field stuff is sorted out, right? Assuming he isn't still a guy dealing with substance issues that's going to crap out of the league like immediately. If he is really back on track and just all that's left is what does a guy at his age with 5 years out of football look like, I think we've got something to work with. But if nothing else, what Aldon Smith does is allow you to scale back on how much you need Everson Griffen to play. Because Everson Griffen, in 2 of the past 3 seasons, has played upwards of 900 snaps as a defensive end, right? Including the playoffs. But like 900 snaps is a lot. And last year, I think up to week 11, he was like second in the NFL in total pressures. Like not in PFF grade, but he was getting after the quarterback. And then week 11 onwards, he sort of fell off a cliff a little bit. But if instead of playing 900 snaps, if he's playing 600 snaps, maybe that week 11 gets pushed out, right? And you actually get the really productive version for the entire season. Aldon Smith could potentially allow you to do that, even if he's just a capable rotational body.
I love that.
If he's anything like the guy that – because here's the interesting thing, right? Like Aldon Smith set the rookie record for total pressures, and he was in the same rookie class as Von Miller, who, by the way, hit the ground running. It's not like Von Miller sucked for year one.
Yep.
Like there was a period of the first year or so, first year or two, where people thought Aldon Smith, not Von Miller, was potentially the generational guy amongst that group, right? So he was on the kind of track to be a generational edge defender the way Von Miller was, and then obviously things went awry. But he was doing that whilst being this, whilst his personal life was a disaster. So while we think, okay, 5 years out of the game, he's not going to be that guy again, he'll be somewhere below that. But maybe like that guy might have only been 75% of what he was capable of because the dude was dealing with substance abuse problems the whole way.
True.
Like what if there was another 25% to access, and now you're trying to calculate what down from the full potential is?
It's just tough to access 4 years later.
Sure, but that's what I'm saying. Like you might be 25% down on that, which ends up being the same guy. You know what I mean?
I got you.
Because the 25% you're losing now is ring rust and age, whereas before it was substance abuse and whatever else he was dealing with, right? You might end up with the same net level, which is to say an all-pro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
The potential for what he can be. Like this is one of the best sort of low-risk, roll the dice because the payoff is absurd.
It's an interesting balance. We'll talk about the linebackers in a minute. But the balance between their defensive line, which is DeMarcus Lawrence and a whole bunch of veteran retreads, essentially, and then the secondary, which other than Clinton-Dix is all homegrown. And they've rolled into the season. And I think part of the reason why we went into the draft and said, man, they have to draft a corner at some point is because not only is it all homegrown, but their entire secondary is like up at the end of this year. Like they're not re-signed.
Right.
Chidobe Awuzie, Jordan Lewis, Anthony Brown, Xavier Woods, and Clinton-Dix are the starting 5. And Trevon Diggs, their second-round pick, will add depth. And, Diggs might take a little bit of time to adjust to the NFL, but it's a nice piece to have for the future. Like every other team, it's going to come down to the secondary. Brown, Awuzie, and Jordan Lewis, all in that secondary, have all had points where they've graded pretty well. In the 60s, 70s, Brown had a stint where he looked really, really good. I think it's going to come down to that trio or Trevon Diggs adding, stepping in and stealing some snaps from one of those guys. That's what it's going to come down to on the back end. So it's a homegrown secondary and a veteran now defensive line, which I think is just a fascinating combination. Linebackers, Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith did not play nearly as well as they did in 2018. 18, they were the best. They looked like the best young linebacking core in the NFL. Vander Esch didn't play as well, was injured. Jalen Smith didn't play as well last year. I think it shows the fickle nature of, certainly PFF grades when it comes to linebackers. But, I think we do a good job of telling you how well these guys played. It's not like our grading system. It's that, good linebacker production is very much dependent on who you play and how you play them and all this stuff. But on paper, feel pretty good about Vander Esch and Jalen Smith and what they bring to your back seven.
Yeah, somebody said this recently,
And
but
Sean Lee.
if you were that 2018 group of linebackers, that class, 2 years in, how on earth do you actually order those guys in terms of like what they are now? Leighton Vander Esch, Roquan Smith, Tremaine Edmonds, Rashaan Evans, it's insane because Leighton Vander Esch looked like by far the best one of them year one.
Yep.
Year two was not nearly the same guy. Rashaan Evans has taken steps forward, but as we talked before, is more of a sort of highlight than a consistent impact. Roquan Smith has been somewhat underachieving, and then everyone loves Tremaine Edmonds because of the size, the speed, the fact that he's getting a bit better. But I honestly would have no idea how to order that group right now.
That's true.
And obviously the things that were sort of so interesting about them as prospects still differentiate them now. Age, experience, all this kind of stuff. So it's a weird group. I mean, I think Leighton Vander Esch showed so much as a rookie, you have to expect him bouncing back to some degree.
I agree.
The secondary is interesting because I think people are going to expect Trevon Diggs to hit the ground running because he was a first-round talent to most people. Like, people expected that the Cowboys to draft him at 17, and they end up taking CeeDee Lamb because he slipped, and then still getting Trevon Diggs in the second round. Like, for them, it's an absolute steal. But I think because of that perception that he's this first-round talent that we were kind of expecting to have in the first place, like, obviously he'll be good as a second-rounder. But I think there were reasons that he fell to the second round, and I think whatever you were going to do with him, he was the kind of corner that was likely to take some time to adjust.
Right.
So I don't know. The group that they have in terms of young additions feel like 2021 players. Like, whether it's Trevon Diggs, the guy, it's also worth mentioning Reggie Robinson that they got in the fourth round, who was a guy a lot of people loved, who's another one of these guys where size, speed, the tools are all there, but it might take a little bit of time to put it all together. But I think this is going to be a team where there's enough talent on the defense for it to hold up, and the offense could be spectacular, at which point the team will be good.
We also have a whole new scheme with Mike Nolan coming in, and Dallas the last few years was leaning more toward that Seattle cover 3, simple 3-1, and that'll be interesting too. We haven't seen Nolan since when was the last time he was a defensive coordinator? I think Atlanta
A while ago
in 2012.
Yeah,
that was when he was last hired as a defensive coordinator, 2012 with the Falcons.
So it's not even like it's not even that we've gone as the old scheme and in comes this. Like, we don't even know what this is, because it's a guy that hasn't really been coordinating for years.
And if it was before, it was more like 3-4-ish. It was more, for whatever that's worth, that was back when the 3-4 was actually pretty distinct and different from the 4-3. I think just from a secondary standpoint, you're just going to get a wider variety of scheme. And that's where I think Trevon Diggs can come in. I think if you do more game plan oriented stuff, having his size to maybe match up against bigger corners, that adds some value to this secondary. So anyway, with Dallas, let's wrap it up on them. What are your thoughts? What do you expect in the season? Are they the favorites in the NFC East?
Yes. I think Dallas and the Eagles are close, but so many things have gone right for the Cowboys this offseason that I think you have to bump them ahead of Philadelphia. I think that was the best draft that anybody had. Top to bottom, first round, CeeDee Lamb being there is insane. As I say, people thought Trevon Diggs was worth the first rounder. They get him in the second. Neville Gallimore in the third was a guy that people were getting at least a round higher.
Love Gallimore. I
mean, in the fourth round, they got Tyler Biadasz, who could start at center for them, and Reggie Robinson, who was a guy a lot of people love. Like this, almost every single step of this draft was, I said it at the time, this was the kind of draft where if you had this in a mock draft simulator and put it out there, people would be like, your sim is broken. There's no way this value lasts all the way down.
To that point, though, is this the year where, okay, that's not going to have as much of an immediate impact?
Sure. But that was just one of the things, right? Plus the coaching change, plus the fact that they retained most of the people of use to them. Plus you add Everson Griffin to replace a Robert Quinn. Like you do patch up the area that needed it. Like everything that needed to go right for this team effectively went right. And I think the biggest thing that could happen is they just free themselves of the weight that was the underachieving nature of the scheme and the coaching staff from before.
That's what I'm most interested to see, though, because Mike McCarthy left Green Bay because everybody said his scheme's stale, he's this, he's that, he peaked early, and he wasted Aaron Rodgers' career and all that stuff, and Rodgers wasn't that much different last year with a new coach and system and coordinator and all that stuff. So I'll be interested to see how McCarthy does. Are we going to be sitting here in week 7, and he's like, I'm taking over the play calling? Let's see how patient he is. Let's see if there's differences in his in-game decision-making and all that stuff. So I agree. Dallas is the favorite. But, like any other new coaching change, could take a little bit of time in the transition. Let's move on to the New York Giants. Daniel Jones returns for year 2 here. I think, honestly, whether you're a Daniel Jones fan or a detractor, you came out of last year saying, I told you so. I mean, we actually saw, like, Kuiper and McShay actually debated that stuff. McShay didn't like him, and he's like, I told you. He's not that good. And Kuiper's like, what are you talking about? I told you. He was great. Thus, I mean, that's Daniel Jones. That is Daniel Jones.
I'm not sure I can imagine a more painful piece of TV than two people confirming their priors after the season.
We'll have to fire it up and see it. Again, Daniel Jones, I think stylistically is the guy, very much like Nick Foles. Stylistically, he can have high highs, he can have low lows. The low lows last year were all the – I don't know what the official fumble total was. Was it like 20?
It's about 1 million.
It was 1 million total fumbles. Mm-hmm. But as far as ones that were truly his fault or ones we would blame him for, it was like 10 or 11. It was bad.
Yeah, about 750,000.
750,000. So 75%
Three quarters of a million?
There you go. That's a lot of bad fumbles. The high-end plays were certainly there. I thought that was interesting to see what we saw from him his last year of college, early in the year before he got hurt. He's got the high-end plays, and he's got high-end plays in and out of the pocket and while taking hits and all that stuff, and those are the plays that will fluctuate year to year. I think this, again, will come down to the supporting cast staying healthy. He never really had Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram all on the field, Saquon Barkley all on the field at the same time. Sounds like Giants fans are really optimistic about that supporting cast. I think it's a pretty good supporting cast, but I think the lack of a true dominant player puts them well below, I think, a lot of the other teams in the league. They're probably middle of the pack as far as supporting cast goes.
Yeah. I kind of like their supporting cast. I think there's a lot of mileage to the idea that, look, they just didn't have those guys on the field together at any point last season. Like, I think genuinely the top 5 receivers in terms of supporting cast that they have did not play a snap together, a single one. So getting all those guys on the field should, I think, make a huge difference. I'm massively intrigued by Daniel Jones. Like, I think that there's probably a pretty healthy perception that I hate the guy because so much of your attitude on a specific player is shaped by what you choose to react to. So with Josh Allen, right, the idea is we hate Josh Allen because we spend most of our time essentially replying to people that say Josh Allen's amazing. So the reverberation from us is just nothing but hate, right? But the idea is it's only because everyone else is going overboard the other direction, right? If you're actually asking where we stand on the guy.
I was first on Josh Allen. I was
different.
the first guy. I was telling people at like midnight in a Mountain West game, like, this is the dude, Josh Allen.
So with Daniel Jones, I think it's kind of similar. Like, most of what I would have said about Daniel Jones is probably negative on the basis that, like, everyone is losing their damn minds about how good he is, right? Yeah. But I will say that I think he was better year one than I was expecting him to be already.
Yeah.
I'm really intrigued by how good he can be, and in particular because he's in the same Gardner Minshew boat of the thing that he sucked at the most is the thing that I think gets fixed just by virtue of playing for a while, right? This idea of you hold on to the ball too long, you're a tick too slow to process and to just generally function. The speed of the game thing is killing him right now. And that's why you get these, million fumbles, of which 750,000 were his fault.
Give or take.
Right. But I think just those young guys, that's the thing that changes when this thing that we all hear about is the speed of the game. Finally, the light goes on, all this kind of cliche crap, right? There's something to it. And I think what happens is that they just start to work out how fast the game at the NFL level functions and how to read things better now that nobody's college open anymore. If you do that and that becomes like maybe a minor flaw of his game as opposed to like a crippling issue, you're already significantly better. Like, you're already talking about a completely different player. Now, the next thing is that I don't know that he had quite as many high-end plays as a lot of people were giving him credit for. Like, I think there were a lot of plays in there that, were sort of the product of the offense. And then every now and again, you get one of these highlight reel things. And there were
a few nice ones.
Sure, yeah. But
under pressure plays.
But again, I think people are saying that this is like a huge part of his game. Like, there's so many of these big-end plays. He had 19 big-time throws, right?
Yeah.
Like, Jameis had 40.
Jones had high-end games, 4 touchdowns, 5, whatever.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So I think the numbers,
games, and we were the ones saying, well, that was that's a dump off that went for 40 yards. Or that, those were inflated just a little bit.
Right. So I think the numbers have people thinking that he's on that Jameis path, right, of like insane, high-end, big-time throws left and right, and you just need to eliminate, the bad. I don't know that he's quite there. Like 19 big-time throws ranked 18th last season.
All that said, like 6.6 yards per attempt last year. Again, not taking, supporting cast, rookie, blah, 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 blah. But if you're coming out of last year, and I just said it at the top of this, I remember a lot of the high-end plays, but this wasn't an explosive passing offense. They were averaging 6.6 per attempt with him back there. So, look, I think there was more – I'm with you. I think there was more encouraging signs than discouraging. But I also think that if you went back and read my preseason scouting report where I said he's a day 2 guy that has a wide range of outcomes year to year and game to game, I think we described him to a T. Now my question is that actually worth taking him in the first round because of it? Maybe we missed on that as far as where you would take that skill set, but I think describing the skill set, we nailed it because he did not play that well in college.
No,
he didn't. He just didn't play that well.
We've been asking the question more than sort of making that declaration, right? That all we've been saying is that we would not take a player that fits these descriptions in the first round, right? So to a lot of people, it's like, you guys are just trying to back up your priors, whether it's Josh Allen or whether it's Daniel Jones. All you guys are doing is trying to prove yourselves right? We're like, but our point with these guys is that there's definitely a way they can be successful. Like literally the line that we were hammering for Josh Allen all the way through is that this guy is not Christian Hackenberg. He has the ability to become a decent NFL player. There's just a lot of question marks, right? And at that point, I don't think that's worth a first-round pick. But because the NFL disagrees and they take guys like that in the first round and actually high up, people are like, well, you guys are just trying to back up what you said. A, we're not, because what we actually said fits that. Right? It's just that they differ on where you would take that. And B, if you look back at our history, you'll show that we don't care about backing it up, right? We had Trubisky as the number 1 quarterback in the NFL, and we were the first people telling you that Trubisky sucked. Like, we do not care about backing up what we said about these guys as prospects because it's more interesting to actually to be right about it in the NFL.
I want to bring something else up. I'm going to look Pat Shurmer in his history, right? So he's gone.
Yes.
But Pat Shurmer, if you look at the times that he called plays or was involved in the offense at the highest level, we get the Rams 2009 and 10. The Rams were bad, and then they drafted Sam Bradford. And that was his rookie season. He may have peaked as a rookie. Sam Bradford. He wasn't great, but he
peaked at Oklahoma.
Okay, he peaked at Oklahoma. I'm Sam Bradford apologist here. Still believe. Sign him.
Even Sam Bradford apologists would say that the best season he ever had was at Oklahoma.
Definitely at Oklahoma. Yeah. Anyway, his rookie season wasn't too bad. He was Shurmer was the head coach of the Browns, 11 and 12. There's actually nothing great coming out of that. But he was also the offensive coordinator for the Eagles in 13 to 15. That's Chip Kelly's years. And I have always attributed those years to being Chip Kelly's offense, whatever. But those were years where if you go back, the quarterback production was better than their actual play. So good job there by Shurmer, right? We'll say that. 2017, he extracted a career year out of Case Keenum, right? That got him the head coaching job with the New York Giants. 2018, he had Eli Manning. And then last year, Daniel Jones got 24 touchdowns. And the reason why you come out of games and it's like, PFF, you idiots. Daniel Jones threw 4 touchdowns and had no picks, and you gave him a 71 grade. What's wrong with you? Mm-hmm. The reason why that happens is because we said, well, it's the playmakers, it's the scheme, it's whatever. My point is, Shurmer's take his head coaching out of it, he's got a pretty good track record of elevating quarterback statistics.
Right.
So are we actually coming out of this year saying he got a lot out of Daniel Jones schematically, even though as a head coach, fine, he may have failed and he's moving on after 2 years.
Yeah, let me structure it a different way and say, so reasons for optimism for the Giants, I think, on offense. One, I do kind of like that receiving group. I think it has the ability to elevate a player or at least not hinder him. 2, Daniel Jones, year 2, I think there's reason to expect a step forward. And B, I think 2.5, I think the thing that he's bad at is the thing that just by a course of playing for a long time fixes itself the easiest, right? Yep. So those would be the reasons for optimism. Reasons for concern, 1, that offensive line, even worse now that Nate Solder is
we'll talk about the line for
opted
sure.
out.
Yep.
And two, what you're saying that Pat Shurmur, gets fired, but does have a pretty good track record at quarterback, and the guy that's coming in to replace him in terms of offensive coordinator is the guy that we just put all the blame at the doorstep of for Dallas underachieving for years, right? So you've gone from a guy who, let's say, from a neutral perspective, you were saying Pat Shurmur has a pretty good track record of going above 500 in terms of quarterback performance versus what should be there. Jason Garrett, you would probably say, has the opposite, right? He's had a track record of underachieving from the quarterback that he's had. So that, I think, would be pretty concerning if you're a Giants fan. You've gone from a guy that's...
You don't know, though, because he's been, there's a difference between head coach and offensive coordinator.
Right, and it's not like...
You don't know.
It's not a certainty. It's just reasons for optimism versus reasons for concern. I would say that's a reason to be concerned.
Let's go to the offensive line then. So real quick, the playmakers, Golden Tate, still awesome after the catch and at the catch point. Mm-hmm. He's got stuff to offer. Sterling Shepard he's been pretty good. He hasn't become maybe the high volume, top 3 slot that we thought he could become, but he's a solid possession receiver. Darius Leighton showed some deep ability as a rookie, and then Evan Ingram, when healthy, good mismatch type of tight end that can move around the formation. That's good guys to throw to, plus Barkley out of the backfield.
Barkley and Dion Lewis there now.
And Dion Lewis. Offensive line-wise, when we did our offensive line rankings and we did our podcast on it, I said, you know what? Of all the teams that could sneak into the top 10, I'm going to say it's the Giants. And it was in part it was because they had Nate Solder, who was coming off of a poor year, but his previous seasons were much better. So I was expecting him to regress to the mean a little bit more.
You were also expecting that last season when I told you that Nate Solder kind of sucked.
But either way, Nate Solder, I feel more confident about Nate Solder than I do third-rounder Matt Parrott.
I'll give you that.
Or Andrew Thomas, really. Like whoever they put at left tackle, it'll probably be Andrew Thomas.
Yes.
And Parrott will probably play right tackle if he even wins the job. We'll figure it out. But if it was Solder at left tackle and Thomas at right tackle, who was our number 1 tackle in the draft, I'd say, okay, I think they'll be okay. And then the interior, it was expecting Will Hernandez to take that year 3 leap.
Yep.
It's Kevin Zeitler's already one of the league's best. And then it's like, okay, your only massive question mark is at center, Spencer Pulley, and it's like, all right, we could deal with that. So I thought the Giants were on their way to the top 10. Now I think they're on their way to the bottom 10 because I love Andrew Thomas. You just don't know what you're going to get from a rookie, say, call him left tackle. Parrott in the 3rd round, the reason why I loved him as a draft pick is because he produced at UConn and hasn't played a lot of football in his career, right? And I'm like, all right, he's got all the tools and skills, and he's still produced, and, like, there's something to him. But I'm thinking in, like, 2022, we're going to get something out of Parrott. If he's forced into the starting lineup, or if it's not him, it's Kyle Murphy or Cam Fleming or Nick Gates, we've got some issues there. And then the interior then it's like the question at center is one of 3 questions instead of the only real question. So I think the offensive line right now could be an issue, and it's in part because of the dominoes coming from Solder.
And remember, as much as we're kind of saying this might improve year 2, Daniel Jones holds onto the ball longer than most players in the NFL. Like that, it causes his own fumbles, but it also stresses the crap out of his pass protection, right? So
the offensive line wasn't nearly as bad as Giants fans felt it was last year, in part because of Jones.
Like Daniel Jones is in an area last season in terms of average time to throw with Russell Wilson, Mr. Extend the Play, Gardner Minshew, who that was his major flaw as well, Jacoby Brissett, that's one of his biggest flaws, Aaron Rodgers, again, holds onto the ball for an age, he's in that bracket of quarterbacks that are right now holding onto the ball way longer than average. And it's one of 2 things. Either it's their crippling flaw, these quarterbacks, or it's like the thing that distinguishes them as a passer, right? Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers make it work that way. Those other guys don't. So even if Jones gets a little bit better, he's probably going to be a negative force on this offensive line.
All right. So offensively, I'll just answer it with a wide range of outcomes. Daniel Jones, if he's under a ton of pressure, he could have a disastrous year, or he could have one of those good years because it's one of those traits, the scouty traits. He sits in there and makes plays under pressure, which at least he attempts to. And when you attempt to make those plays, as he does, sometimes they go well, sometimes they don't. That's the bottom line on Jones. And there'll be a year in there, Giants fans, much like Eli, there'll be a year or 2 where he looks really good. It's going to happen. Defensively, this is where they still, I don't think, have taken many steps forward. Patrick Graham comes in to coordinate the defense. His only time coordinating was last year with the Miami Dolphins. Now, they got better. as the year went on, they had very little talent, but they were the worst defense in the NFL by a wide margin, the Dolphins. So the talent with the Giants, maybe slightly better, but we've got them in the 20s for everything. Defensive line, linebacker, and secondary.
My question with this is, what are they building?
I don't know.
They've got this stable of monster run-stuffing interior players, all of whom presumably are going to be starting because there's no other option. So Leonard Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson, Dexter Lawrence, they bring in B.J. Hill is there as well. And then the linebackers, they're also run-focused players, right? My boy David Mayo, that's the only thing he's good at. He's good at it, but God bless him, he can't cover that well. Blake Martinez, he's more of a downhill run player than a coverage force as well, though he at least has shown weird seasons where he's been good at that. But what is this team? This is a defense that is not constructed for 2020 NFL football.
I like to compare to the 2012 Falcons a lot. Was it that year that they just brought in? They brought in all the big bodies.
They got tougher up front.
Yeah, they just brought in a ton of big bodies up front, and that is what the Giants are. I mean, it is. I like the fact that Gettleman took a bunch of shots in the secondary the last couple of years. One of them is DeAndre Baker, who's facing jail time,
and one of them is Sam Beal, who's opted out.
Yeah, so that's part of the issue here. Now, when you look, their secondary, we ranked 27th, but that was where I really shuffled to 27 through 32 or 26 through 32 when I did that and said any of them could land anywhere in this range.
Yeah.
Now, knowing there's no Baker, who did struggle as a rookie, no Beal, they're not great. I mean, that's a bad secondary. They bring in James Bradbury, who, another, former Panther, Gettleman's familiar with, but he's had one good year.
He has, but I do think that Bradbury will look immediately better just by being away from the role that he had in Carolina. Yeah. He had one of the toughest gigs in the NFL in terms of consistent week-to-week matchups. Julio Jones twice a season, Mike Evans twice a season. That dude has faced the who's who of receiving talent in week on week more than almost anybody else in the NFL. He, in terms of Stephon Gilmore's or Jalen Ramsey is a better example, right? Jalen Ramsey tracks the number one receiver every single week, right? So he's going to have the hardest gig of pretty much anybody. In terms of receivers that don't do that every single week religiously, or corners rather that don't do it, Bradbury, I think, had the toughest job in the NFL. So just by getting the hell out of that to New York, where, all right, you're facing some good receivers in the NFC East, but it's not the murderer's row of the NFC South, I think he immediately looks significantly better.
And even if he is, he's their best guy. That's fine. But the rest of the depth chart is Montre Hardage.
It's not good.
Christian Angulo, Corey Ballantyne, who had a couple good plays as a rookie last year. Grant Haley. It's not great. Jabril Peppers and Julian Love showed some things as a rookie last year, moving to safety, which is fine. Jabril Peppers has been okay. But this is remember when 2006 you got the Williams Wall in Minnesota and New England rolls in there? And they're New England used to do this all the time with Brady. They're we're not running against this front. We're going to throw the ball literally every down. And they threw the ball 22 straight times to start the game or whatever it was. Wouldn't you do that against the Giants?
Yeah.
With Leonard Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Dexter Lawrence up front.
Right.
I'm not running against that.
Their pass rush doesn't look great at all. It's Lorenzo Carter. They brought back Marcus Golden, who we talked about. His numbers were somewhat of a mirage. He was the guy that had 40% of his pressure was clean up, unblocked, all that kind of stuff. His numbers, the 10 sack thing was not who he was last season, right? So if you're expecting that to be your big impact guy, that's a problem. Maybe you're expecting a step forward from the young guys. Kyler Fackrell has flashed the ability to rush the quarterback, but never done it on a consistent basis. So you've got this defense full of monstrous run stuffers, no clear pass rushing plus play, and a secondary with major question marks. This is just not a defense that's set up to be good.
What it looks like is the front seven kind of looks like the Ravens the last couple of years, where it's here's some run stoppers, we don't have any legit one-on-one winner, pass rush winners or anything like that. However, we've got a top 3 secondary in the NFL, so we'll be okay. The Giants have essentially done the same thing, except with one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. That's the issue.
They remind me of the Jets from like 5 years ago, right? Where it's like, how are they going to get all of these giant run stuffers on the field at the same time? Like,
it's always a Leonard Williams team.
Where are they going to play? Because there's too many of them.
Yeah.
They've done the same thing, and you're right. Again, without like the back end thing that made it function. Like back then, the Jets had Rex Ryan's defensive scheme that was able to scheme up pressure, and B, Darrelle Revis, which is kind of useful for that, right? So, I don't understand. I don't understand how this defense functions in 2020. It just doesn't look like it's built the right way, particularly when you're talking about in a division that's going to have some good offenses. Like, I mean, this is a problem.
You've got a whole new coaching staff, as we mentioned. I think the Giants, I don't have a ton of confidence in them. I think their best case scenario, though, is the step forward from Jones, the receiving talent all being out there together. Much like we talked about with other teams, there's a lot. This needs to happen. This needs to, there's 4 or 5 things that need to happen, including Jones, the receiving core, Barkley. I always mention Barkley's going to have one of those. He'll rush for like 1,800 one year when he's got pristine run blocking. That's the other part about Solder. Say what you want about Solder in pass protection. He's a pretty good run blocker. And if you had him and Thomas and Zeitler and Will Hernandez, like you could see, Saquon having some big play opportunities from a run game standpoint. I'm not feeling that right now. Secondary what ifs, Blake Martinez and the linebacking core what ifs, pass rush what ifs. I think the Giants are bottom half of the NFC East.
Yes, I mean I think this is
battling the WFTs.
Yeah, I think this is the division of 2 teams. So yeah, they're definitely in the second half of it. I mean, the optimism for them is on offense, right? It's the receiving group, it's the quarterback. Like if Daniel Jones takes a big step in year 2, which is entirely possible. Like the stuff about his college situation is all true, right? Wretched environment of which he clearly outperformed what was probably reasonable to expect. So if he does take a big step, that will paper over a lot of cracks, right? So there's definitely a way this offense is good. I almost don't see any way the defense is good, which is their issue.
All right, before we move on to the rest of the NFC East, quick break to tell you about the preseason NFL Draft Guide 2021 draft. We're looking forward with 100 NFL Draft prospect player profiles, our exclusive grades, advanced stats. It's all part of Edge or Elite, and it's live on PFF.com this Wednesday, August 19th. So go check it out. If you have Edge or Elite, it'll just be there for you to download. Big PDF. I think it's over 400 pages or whatever it might be. So, or is that the College Football Magazine? Either way, I think we're dropping thousands of pages of awesome this week in PDF form. Plus, of course, the college football subscription with the promo code CFB25. If you are in the industry, essentially if you're in draft Twitter, which is a very specific group of people, but there's actually no reason for you not to get this because it's going to aid in you doing your job. Draft Twitter folks. So CFB25 is the promo code. You get 25% off the college football grades and premium stats. And then the preseason NFL Draft Guide is a part of Edge or Elite. That's the PFF side, the NFL side of the product. Edge or Elite Draft Guide is out this week. So Philadelphia Eagles, let's move on here. They won the division last year.
Yes. Went
to the playoffs. Where do you stand? A lot of people are like, hey, look at Carson Wentz carrying this team. And when they didn't have any receivers. And, of course, all performance is going to have dependence on what's happening around you. But Wentz was also one of our lowest graded quarterbacks last year down the stretch from like week 5 on. We had to completely change our narrative, and we said early in the year, he's making big-time throws left and right that are getting dropped or not falling incomplete or whatever it might be. And it's like, man, Wentz is playing better than his 6.5 yards per attempt would show. And then down the stretch, the receivers all got hurt. He still had his 2 tight ends to throw to, but he wasn't making nearly as many good throws. He was fumbling in the pocket. He had some issues there, and he did not grade all that well. But they found a way to make the playoffs despite Greg Ward being the number 1 wide receiver. I've never seen a depleted wide receiver group.
So that's the thing.
Like this team.
I mean, I think it really is worth – his grades went about as I would have expected them to, right? In that early in the season, he was playing really well. He was playing better than his numbers showed because there was a point where we were pointing out where his receivers had dropped literally, I think, 3 or 4 game-winning passes. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Not just like big plays that would have been touchdowns, like actual this is the difference between a win or a loss in
Lions,
this game.
Falcons,
Right.
couple games, yeah.
So a few of those that completely change the narrative. Like those break your way, suddenly you're an MVP candidate. Those don't go your way. It's like, what's wrong with Carson Wentz and the Eagles? And then late in the season, everybody was hurt. Like Greg Ward was their number one receiver, and Greg Ward just came out of the AAF. Like I've never seen a receiving core get that badly wrecked to the point where you're bringing in a guy that probably isn't on your roster, in most normal situations, and he's your number one and basically the only guy with any kind of experience of anything.
Coming into the year, we said, okay, we didn't call him the best receiving core. We called it the best group of playmakers.
Right.
And on paper, it looked great. You have big-bodied Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson
so,
and
everybody. We were talking about the Patriots receiving core being bad enough that it caused Tom Brady's decline last season. Like the Eagles was worse. And so for it to affect Carson Wentz's grade and performance and all those kinds of things, I think is entirely expected. I think that part made total sense. And for the Eagles, it's huge that this year, in theory, that shouldn't be a factor, right? I mean, it shouldn't have been last year either, but Lightning's not going to strike twice in the same place year on year. So the Eagles suddenly have a completely different receiving group than they did last season where he had to battle through it. Plus, they add a guy like Jalen Reagor in the first round who should be an immediate impact player.
It's one of the most fascinating stories, I think, from a team-building standpoint. They've got Howie Roseman. They've just got a good group of evaluators over there, and they came into the offseason with a legitimate strategy, get faster, both sides of the ball. And they also drafted Jalen Hurts as a backup quarterback in the second round. So there's just a lot of things at play, like are the Eagles moving in the right direction? Let's start with the speed thing. Last year, one of the reasons why I liked their receiving group is because I get attracted to the ability to win different ways. I love that they had a speed receiver. Aguilar was normally good in the slot, and Jeffrey's huge. And the two tight ends both have unique skill sets that are tough to cover. And then they added J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. They had all the skill sets covered, and it looked like Wentz had a million dudes to throw to. Now, it's all speed guys and Alshon Jeffrey and J.J., right? I mean, it's Deshaun Jackson's back. They've traded for Marquise Goodwin, who ended up opting out, which probably helps their decision-making process as far as unpacking this receiving core. I thought Deshaun Jackson would be hitting the streets. I mean, I thought he'd be just the odd man out, but maybe he is an impact player because he still is really good.
Yeah, I think he will be. I mean, I think the Marquise Goodwin opting out thing, it makes their life easier in terms of figuring out what to do because they have one less body to shoehorn into this thing. But I think it actually also leaves them with this really balanced receiving group, right? Alshon Jeffrey, big body possession guy who does actually have a consistent track record of being a plus contested catch guy. Like generally, I think that is an overrated, overblown attribute or trait. I think most people that we think of being good contested catch guys actually aren't.
He's a good possession receiver. He's not just contest, but you trust him.
Possession, contested catch, he is actually good at that stuff. Deshaun Jackson has been the best deep threat in the NFL for the majority of his career, still should be. I mean, there's training camp videos, Steve. They're there. They're everywhere. They're out there. Deshaun Jackson has been beating Darius Slay like a drum a few times. So that's fun. Jalen Reagor, I think, fits in as the third starter, if you like, in a 3 wide receiver set as, slot, run after the catch, quickness, gimmicky stuff, right? Deshaun Jackson is the deep threat. Alshon Jeffrey is your possession contested catch guy, and Jalen Reagor is everything else. Then you have as depth Greg Ward, who was functional last year as the only guy left standing, and the reclamation project that is what is J.J. Arcega-Whiteside after such an ugly first year in the NFL, right? I don't think they've fully given up on him, but like you don't want him playing right now given what he showed.
Right. And then they drafted 5th round receiver John Hightower, 4.43 speed. Quez Watkins, it runs in the 4.3s. So they were adding speed. They brought Robert Davis in, a former combine standout. I mean, they were like, we're going to be faster. I love it. I love speed. And I love the fact that Carson Wentz, just to reiterate once again, you don't just get better every year as a quarterback.
Right.
Wentz would have been the perfect story. Pretty good rookie season, MVP candidate in his second season. Like, now you're a superstar. That's it. You're a star every year. But that hasn't been the case. He's been good. He's good. Carson Wentz is good. 2018, 19, good player. And if you back it up and say what went well in 2017, like why couldn't he match it? Well, he was so good at stuff that is not sustainable, like third down. He was incredible on third down, incredible under pressure, and his touchdown rate was through the roof. But he had all of the pieces healthy the entire season that he was throwing to. So if this group stays healthy, and it is as you described, it's Jeffrey and Jackson and Rager and however else they piece together wide receiver 4, and then Dallas Goedert, from a fantasy standpoint, I think steals some targets from Zach Ertz. Ertz has been high volume, good route running tight end who gets open. Goddard, I think, is a better all-around player as far as run blocking goes. He can stretch the seam a little bit. I think Goddard steals some targets. But, man, again, on paper, it should be a good group to throw to. And I think Wentz, if these guys stay healthy, Wentz should have a good season.
Yeah, I think skill position players across the board are a plus for the Eagles. The receiving, the wide receiver group is really good. That they have 2 tight ends rather than one elite one. So they might have the best of the tight end 1-2 punch in the NFL. Zach Ertz is still good, though I think on the way down. Dallas Goedert is really good and on the way up, so that might balance itself out. And then, Miles Sanders, I think, is a huge product of the blocking that was in front of him, but he's a talented player. Like, he's a really good player. And, of course, my guy, Boston Scott.
And, of course, Boston Scott.
Who I think could genuinely steal, like, a lot of third down reps in that offense. I think they like making him into a Darren Sproles now that they don't have Darren Sproles.
Yeah.
I don't think he's quite the same player, but I think he can kind of do that job. Like, if you give him the Darren Sproles out of the backfield targets and as a matchup problem player, given that role does exist in this offense, I think he can do that to a pretty high level. Plus, he can run between the tackles despite being the size of your shoe.
The little guy. Jalen Hurts being the second-round player, do they try some Taysom Hill stuff? They did not dismiss it. And, again, I don't think the Saints are winning the Super Bowl because of Taysom Hill or anything like that. But the more you can give defenses to think about, there's a lot to think about with this Eagles offense already. Do you throw Jalen Hurts in the mix as a change up as well? I think that's potentially on the table.
My question would be, why? What does it do?
I don't know. He's got good running back skills.
Does he?
He runs the ball pretty well. He's not great. He's not dynamic.
I mean, is he even as good an athlete as Taysom Hill?
They're probably comparable.
I think Taysom Hill's a better athlete than Jalen Hurts. And
well, let me just say this: I don't think Hurts has an incredible skill set to work with. I liked the pick more so as the insurance as a backup player, and the fact that he generally hits open receivers pretty well, and that's a good thing to bank on projecting a quarterback. So I liked that as a pick.
I don't hate it as a pick. I'm just in terms of like getting him on the field now as a Taysom Hill package, right?
Yeah.
So as much we can debate the Taysom Hill thing back and forth all day long, and people do. The Taysom Hill package factor threat in New Orleans at least does a couple of things. One, Taysom Hill has a completely different level of athleticism than Drew Brees. Like, Drew Brees is an immobile statue in the pocket. Nah, not an immobile statue. Drew Brees is not a threat to scramble and or run, ever. So as soon as you put Taysom Hill in there, there's something different to think about, right? And two, Drew Brees has also now got this declining arm strength thing, and Taysom Hill has an arm. So it also gives you a second thing to think about. Jalen Hurts is a comparable athlete to Carson Wentz, who's already there. He's also a comparable threat to scramble to Carson Wentz, who's already there.
But
like,
Wentz
what does bringing him in do?
Do they use Hurts in the red zone and say
To achieve what?
to keep Carson Wentz healthy? So like, if you weren't worried about Carson Wentz's health, which has been a massive issue in his career, right? Hasn't played in a playoff game, even though they've made the playoffs. If you were trying to conserve him, would you bring Jalen Hurts in, run some zone read type stuff, and say, okay, I mean, if we can scheme it up well enough, like you can hit some open dudes in the red zone. The issue with that is Carson Wentz is really good down there because he's got a cannon, which works in tight windows. It's not throw the ball 70 yards. It's tight window throws that Wentz makes. He makes plays outside the pocket, and he could hold the ball in his own keeper every now and again and make some plays. But do you think they want to be so safe with him and say, we're going to play the long game with Wentz, we're actually going to try Hurts as a red zone change of pace, and when you're throwing to all these dudes, the tight ends and JJ and Alshon Jeffrey, you should be okay, and plus your rushing ability.
I think at the point where you are scheming, you're changing your entire offense to protect your quarterback, who may not get hurt anyway.
Then you got the wrong quarterback.
Well, you either got the wrong quarterback or you're you might as well just stop, right? Like it's a dangerous game. There's risks associated. Your quarterback is the most important part, but like he's a risk to get hurt. But look, you can't say, all right, we're not going to have a red zone quarterback just in case our actual quarterback gets hurt in those red zone plays. Like, what if he gets hurt on, the plays between the 20? Like, do we suddenly need to start removing him from 3rd and short situations?
But this is when he first blew out in 2017, the MVP season. It was on a run in the red zone. Yeah. You know how teams work, right? They're like, that was the thing that got him hurt. Like, Steve Young's career ended because a rookie blew a pass protection, a rookie running back or whatever it was. So it's like, well, rookies can never pass protect ever in the history of the NFL. Like, it can't happen. Steve Young got a concussion. Yeah. Derek Carr got hurt on the one sack that Donald Penn gave up. Therefore, Donald Penn can't pass protect anymore, right? Like, that's what they think of. I could see that with Hurts if they're talking about mixing him in. I could just see it. Oh, we're going to keep Wentz healthy. We won't use him in the red zone. God. I'm not saying they're going to, but anyway, my fantasy football prediction is more targets for Goddard and fewer for Ertz.
Okay.
Offensive line-wise, big questions. Andre Dillard stepping in at left tackle.
Yeah.
Good job team building from a forward-looking. Jason Peters is going to be gone. We bring in Andre Dillard. So he's the guy now, and then Peters comes back as the starting right guard now, which is a tough transition to make. But the Eagles still on paper should be pretty good offensively, line-wise.
The Andre Dillard thing is a bit like the Taven Bryan pick that we talked about with the Jags, right? They correctly forecast how this would work in that a year or two's time, this guy would need to step in, be the starter, and even though it wasn't an area of need at the time, it's going to look seamless now. The only thing is that relies on you actually getting that right and that guy being the player that you thought he was. Taven Bryan so far has not been that player for the Jags, so the end result is bad. Dillard has yet to show that he can be a quality left tackle. Now he needs to, because suddenly they've gone from, all right, it would be nice if you immediately show some plus play, to now you're actually the starter. If you suck, we've got some problems. It's a huge year for Andre Dillard. He needs to show that he can be that guy. And the Jason Peters thing is going to be really interesting. I mean, A, it's a really difficult transition. B, there are people out there that think that idea of, you spend years and years doing it this way, you shift to the other way, that's going to cause some real, like, biomechanical problems to your body. Like, who was it that switched sides and immediately, like, blew out an Achilles or whatever?
Wasn't that Penn?
Yeah. So they asked Penn to switch sides after, like, a decade of doing things one way, and then immediately parts of his body just explode. So, it's going to be interesting, the Jason Peters thing. You've got to think that he's such a quality player, period, that if his body holds up, he'll be a solid right guard for no other reason than, he's not lacking in the skill set. He's just a really good offensive lineman. So, but I think there is a reasonable fear that his body doesn't hold up. It hasn't been holding up anyway, even just playing left tackle. Now you're asking him to completely change every biomechanical aspect of what he's doing and flip sides. It's a rough ask.
I still would have loved to see Peters play left tackle a few other places. So I think they'll be good up front. They had to make that moves because of Brandon Brooks being out for the year. Defensively, here's the deal. Eagles fans, they buy into the story that it starts up front.
Yes.
What do you got? By
the way, there's this outside chance that, let's say the Andre Dillard thing. So let's say Andre Dillard is a disaster, right? Completely unviable, and you're a few weeks into the season, you have to figure out what the hell we're doing about left tackle. You're left now in this really interesting spot where, do we move Jason Peters back? Do we essentially flip him and Andre Dillard and ask Dillard to play right guard? Equally questionable. Or does Jordan Mailata actually get a shot playing left tackle for this team?
Oh, man. Me and loving – if you can find a starter out of nowhere,
freaky,
like a Jordan
plus
Mailata,
athlete who's shown well in preseason but is never going to get the shot.
But we don't have preseason. Like, Mailata needed preseason. Like, he needs every last rep.
He needed preseason, or he needed Andre Dillard to be a disaster. Like,
I think, it's not as simple. Offensive linemen talk about this all the time. It's never as simple as taking tackles and just kicking them into guards. I do think, like, if you fail at tackle, you should have a shot at guard. I think the Eagles, though, have a bunch of just tackles. Like Prince Tega, Winogu, 6th round pick, and then Jack Driscoll, the 4th round pick. Like, those dudes are they're tackles. They're not guards. Matt Pryor could play guard. He was probably going to be the guy behind Brooks. if they didn't sign Jason Peters. Andre Dillard's another guy that, like, he's a swift-footed, pass-protecting tackle. Like, that's what he is. Like, they have a bunch of guys who are tackles.
Yeah.
So I don't know who plays guard. Like, even Jason Peters, he could do it because he's got power and all that stuff. But they don't have classic guards on this team. So I don't know. I think I would be fine with kicking Jason Peters back out to left tackle. I just don't know if Dillard's the guy that you could put it. I think Matt Pryor's the guy that has to play guard if Dillard was a disaster.
Right, which is why I'm saying that Peters probably doesn't move, at which point Mailata might get a shot at playing left tackle.
Maybe. Yeah, Mailata could play guard or tackle. I don't know. We'll see. We don't have preseason to evaluate his development.
He looks like a tackle only as well in terms of size, shape, all that kind of stuff.
And you probably, from a simplistic standpoint,
guy learned to play football like a fortnight ago. You probably don't want him learning guard.
A fortnight ago. Here's the bottom line with the Eagles. 2017, and they won the Super Bowl, and everybody's like, it all started up front. The Eagles have had a top 5 pass rush every single season since 2015. Their defensive line has been excellent every single year. Now, granted, they were number 1 in 2017. But they were second in 2016, and they were third in 2018 and all that stuff. The difference was the coverage grade. That was it. That was the only difference. They have not finished, since that time, they have not finished above 12th, and they've usually been 15th or lower every single year except one since 2015.
Definitely true. The going from a crappy coverage unit to even an average coverage unit moves the needle more. On the other hand, I also think there's something to this idea that there is a threshold line in pressure where you go from being it's a problem to an offense to it is suffocating an offense. And the Eagles certainly had one year where they crossed that line. And they went from, we're gonna cause some pressure on the quarterback, and he's gonna have to have his hands full to succeed this week, to this guy is gonna be like under a tsunami of pressure, and there's almost no way of this offense functioning given the levels we're looking at.
And you don't know how to block it up. You don't know who to block.
And it's just, so once you reach that level, it's so difficult. But the problem with that is it's like this idea of, assembling the 2017 Jags on defense. Like, you can kind of put it all together and it functions for 1 year. It's just not sustainable. Like, I don't think you can build that. And the Eagles have tried. Like, they've took a swing at doing that. And as you said, they've had a good pass rush every year, but it's only really like come together in that irresistible, unstoppable force for 1 year.
But my point there was they were good that year because Patrick Robinson showed up and was awesome in the slot. I mean, they were excellent on the back end. Yeah. They have had one of the best pass. They may not be suffocating every year, but they've had one of the best pass rushes every single year. Mm-hmm. The difference in their success has always just been on the back end. And they've invested differently there. I think Nickel Roby-Coleman he's been, because we always talk about the value of the slot corner, he's been an underrated, really good slot corner. Darius Slay has been really good outside of last season with the Lions. This is a much better group of corners than what they trotted into the season with last year, because it's a lot of the same guys. But last year it was a whole bunch of, they're young and they've played a couple good games here and there, like hope it all comes together. It didn't. Jalen Mills not playing corner and moving to safety helps. You lose Malcolm Jenkins. He's been a pretty good, movable chess piece. But they added a whole bunch of movable pieces defensively because that's all they drafted. Davion Taylor, Kayvon Wallace. Like, they drafted guys who are athletic and hybrids. And, again, from a team-building standpoint, I think they're going to have a lot more speed, athleticism, and coverage ability in that back seven, which I think should help, while the defensive line they look like they could be top 5 again, right? With Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave coming in, Derek Barnett. They have pieces again. Yeah, the defensive front is still, it's always been so good because they've run like 7 deep in terms of guys who can get a ton of pressure. I think they still are. Derek Barnett, Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Vinnie Curry is back. Malik Jackson is still there, brought in from that insane Jacksonville defense. Josh Sweat, Gennard Avery flashed in Cleveland. He's still there. Another hybrid. Right. Like, they've got a ton of guys that can rush the passer and get pressure. So I think that should still be a big part of this defense. The secondary is really interesting. They've got a ton of players. As you say, they added all these hybrid guys, these matchup players on offense or on defense. Yeah, Will Parks, Davion Taylor, all those guys, these matchup issues. I think Slay is a prime candidate, despite the training camp videos, to bounce back.
In our world, he didn't have a good grade last season at all, but he's a great example of how dependent defensive backs are on the offense, right? On the quarterback and the receiver.
And in the pass rush, too. The Lions.
Yeah, but this notion of, like, the perfect throw beats the perfect coverage every play, right? Like, if you watch the plays that he gave up, he's, like, draped all over the guy every single snap, and somehow, Stephon Diggs is reaching an extra foot beyond him and catching the ball anyway, right? Like, that doesn't usually happen consistently for an extended period of time. If you're draped all over a guy every single snap, most of the time you're going to end up with some pretty good coverage numbers. For last year he didn't, so the grade wasn't good. But I could easily see that immediately bouncing back this year, and you get old Darius Slay again. Plus, he's not going to be asked to play
They played a lot of
pure man coverage 60% of the snaps either. So I think Slay could be a lot better. Anything that gets Jalen Mills the hell away from being the center of attention at cornerback is a good thing. But that second corner is an interesting battle. Avonte Maddox, does Sidney Jones realize his potential? Is Rasul Douglas still in the mix? Like, that's an interesting development, how that guy goes. And then Nickel Roby-Coleman is that's such a bargain. I don't understand how they even had the opportunity to bring that.
Give me all of those productive, it's like Mike Hilton with the Steelers. Just give me all of those productive slot corners. I'm telling you, like, the Steelers, Eagles fans are probably not looking back at 2017 and being like, man, Patrick Robinson was really the biggest key. But, like, he really was. He was one of the biggest differences on that team versus the teams on either side for the Eagles, 2015, 16, and then 18
also,
and 19.
single most interesting thing about this defense is it looks like they're legitimately going to start TJ Edwards, which is fascinating to me.
Because I mentioned they were going to be faster and more athletic, and then also TJ Edwards.
Right.
A guy that's just been a really productive linebacker. We still ranked their linebackers in the bottom tier because we haven't seen a whole lot of Edwards, but we gave him the number 2 defensive line, number 12 secondary. Again, anchored by Slay, and somewhat expecting Slay to just bounce back and be the guy that he was 2014 through.
Have you got your IQ thing fired up? Where does he rank in, like, percentile athlete? Because it's got to be like single digits. This guy is fascinating to me because
Edwards?
Yeah, one of the sort of takeaways of PFF college grading has been certain positions it predicts NFL success better than others, but there's always this athletic component that you need to fold in, right?
Yuck.
Like, where is he? What do we got?
What do you want?
Bring him out. 40.
40-yard dash, 5th percentile, 4.87.
3 cone.
Hold on. Height and weight, by the way.
They're not good either.
22nd percentile.
Yeah.
So we're talking a dude who's small.
Yes.
Doesn't weigh a lot.
Isn't fast.
5th percentile, 40.
Change of direction.
2nd percentile, 10-yard split, 1.74. For perspective, at 277 pounds, I did a 181.
Wow.
10-yard. He was a 174.
No, forget the 270 whatever pounds and 9 foot of length. Like, you're the least least designed human for explosive.
Because we worked on just like steps. You just got to do it in 5 big steps.
Right. But my point is, you're like the least well designed human in the world for, like, exploding over 10 yards.
True.
Like, even Usain Bolt does all of his work from like 60 to 100. Like, the first 10 is not where Usain Bolt wins because he's 6'5".
181. That's my best, I think. 181.
Okay, so,
something like that. Anyway, 2nd percentile, 10-yard split. 13th percentile bench press. He had 16 reps. Vertical and broad. 28th percentile vertical. 16th percentile broad.
What do we got? 3 cone. Give me a change of
He
direction.
was above average
Ooh.
in the 3 cone and 20-yard shuttles.
Okay.
57th and 58th percentile, respectively. So that's what TJ Edwards brings to the table.
Yes, overall. But anyway, so my point was, one of the areas that's been most interesting in terms of the effect of athleticism has been at linebacker. We've got this sequence of linebackers that grade really well in college, but they're so bad of an athlete that it doesn't translate to the NFL. They just have no shot, right? And you're thinking guys like Paul Dawson, Scooby Wright, these guys are incredibly productive college linebackers, get to the NFL, and they just suck so much as an athlete. It's not going to happen, right? TJ Edwards is in that bracket of crappy athlete. He is in the bracket of you should not be good, and yet seems to be, right? College grading was incredible every single year. And the other thing is, most of those guys are much better against the run than they are in coverage. Edwards was really good in coverage in college, preseason grades have been really good.
He only had 33 coverage snaps last year, so we don't really know.
So this is what I'm saying, right?
NFL-wise.
Preseason grades have been really good. Actually has some actually has some playing time at the NFL level in the regular season, albeit incredibly small sample size. But that's been good. Even his NFL special teams grades are good. This guy has graded well at every level of football he has played, despite being a crappy athlete. And it looks like the Eagles are actually going to give him a shot to see if he can do that over a full season.
You gave me an idea for a podcast. We should just simulate the preseason. We should just do like a fake preseason podcast where we just create hype for just make up stuff that happened, like a whole show. Here's what happened in the 4 preseason games.
Okay.
This guy broke out. This guy's going to be, just make stuff up. Yeah. Anyway, Edwards' college stuff was awesome. Coverage grade, coverage all over the place. Even when he lined up in the slot, run defense, everything was well above.
And this guy, by the way, goes undrafted because of all these things we talked about. Like this level of athlete does not succeed at the NFL level, goes undrafted, still catches on, plays well in preseason, gets some playing time. Like I'm just fascinated that he's going to get a shot to see if he can do that over a legitimate sample size in the regular season. And if he does, like if he plays well this season, that I don't know if it changes some models, but that causes people to go back to the drawing board and reassess what they know about linebackers and athleticism and college to NFL transition.
Watch TJ Edwards closely. I'm intrigued by the Eagles. I think they're right there with Dallas in this division.
Yeah.
I love what they've done on the back end, and I think they've got all the pieces offensively. It's going to be them just not getting hurt as often as they did last year, right? I mean, it has to be.
Yeah.
I think Wentz will be all right. Wentz is a good quarterback. We called him a tier 3 quarterback too. I also think at the end of this, you could put him or Dak in tier 2 if you see another good year from either one of those guys. I don't think it's a knock to put them in tier 3, but I think if you look at their production and their grades, it's pretty consistent that they move with what's around them, probably more than other guys.
Yeah, I think these two teams were really close. Obviously, they were last year as well, but more things went right for Dallas in the offseason than went right for Philadelphia.
I think that's fair.
I think you give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of a head-to-head.
Wrapping it up in the NFC East, it's the Washington football team.
Yes, it is.
WFT.
I kind of like the TBDs. That was growing on me.
The Washington TBDs. Let me just start with this. Ranking-wise, we had the Washington football team bad everywhere except the defensive line.
Okay.
I mean, they're 26th or 24th or worst in every position group.
This happens.
Tier 4 quarterback, we haven't seen enough of Dwayne Haskins, and the number 3 defensive line.
This happens, by the way, every now and again where teams end up with this collection of first-round picks at a certain spot.
Yeah.
And usually it's because they've acquired a bunch of guys that are second time around.
Yes.
They didn't pan out somewhere else, and we've brought them in, and then, oh, look, they're all first-round guys, and it's a funny story, right? Washington's they've done that, but Washington drafted them all. They've got now Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, Jonathan
17,
Allen,
18,
Chase
19,
Young,
and 20.
and Ryan Kerrigan. That's 5 guys that Washington drafted who were first-round picks. And in addition to that, you've got Ryan Anderson, right, still there, who's a second-round pick. You've got, and the ironic thing is that in all of this, Matt Ioannidis might be their most consistent defensive interior guy, who was the fifth round, the 5th-round grinder from Temple. I don't know that I've ever seen that happen before.
If you draft defensive linemen for either that or you trade away your first-round picks, chances are the rest of your roster will rank in the 20s.
Yeah.
Because you put all your resources into defensive line. All that said, it's a nice defensive line with Chase Young coming in.
It should be.
Ryan Kerrigan and Montez Sweat and Deron Payne, all these dudes, putting it together looks pretty good. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball, though. I wanted to rank their receivers 31st or 32nd, but your Terry McLaurin love talked me out of it. It is Terry McLaurin and
not a lot else.
Really, not a lot else.
Yeah.
Guys that have fly the Simses, Cam and Steven Sims. We've seen flashes at times. Trey Quinn has flashed a little bit here and there. Kelvin Harmon's hurt. Antonio Gandy-Golden, they draft in the 4th round. Dontrell Inman is the Madden creative player.
Love that.
What do they have besides Terry McLaurin?
For anyone that's been listening to the podcast for long enough, we used to have a producer called Taylor, and he was a big San Diego Chargers fan back then. I can use that.
You
They
could say
were.
that.
They
That's what
were
he
the
was.
San Diego Chargers.
I don't know if he's a Los Angeles Chargers fan anymore.
Who knows?
Because he's a San Diego fan.
But he used to say that Dontrell Inman was like a Madden creative player before he'd had all the attributes put in, where it just defaults to 60 across the board. That was Dontrell Inman. So when they signed him, I was like, this could not be more perfect. The generic default Washington football team signed the generic Madden creative player, Dontrell Inman. It couldn't be better.
Also that year, I think he went to the Colts and was like dead smack average grade.
Yeah, at one point when we used the old plus-minus system, he had like a 0.0 grade after 1,000 snaps
Yeah,
worth
it was
of stuff.
perfect. Good analysis, too.
So McLaurin, I think, is like genuinely special. So my point with you in the rankings is, look, one elite special receiver makes them better than like dead last. It just does. I'm also kind of intrigued by Antonio Gandy-Golden.
I'm intrigued as well, but fourth round.
No, I'm not saying that he should drag that receiving group up any further. And right now he's not even like necessarily starting, but I think he's a guy that quickly could become something interesting in that roster. One, he's one of those crazy like height, weight, size, speed, athletic freaks. Two, as will always be my starting point, graded really well at the Senior Bowl practices, Steve. This year, Denzel Mims was like number one we'd ever seen, right?
Wait. We have breaking news.
Uh-oh. What do you got?
The Titans have activated Corey Davis.
Huh. Okay. So Denzel Mims is the best Senior Bowl week of practice receiver we've ever seen. But Gandy-Golden was like number 2 this year. He was right up there in terms of dominating guys all through that week. And 3, so this is ridiculous, right? This is like, there's no reason to base it on anything. But I'm always kind of intrigued by guys that have like something that at least I perceive as freaky mental ability to do something, right? Like, have you ever successfully solved a Rubik's Cube?
I don't believe so.
Neither have I, right? And when I see people do it, it's like witchcraft to me. My brain does not even understand what the hell those things are.
No, I don't
it's absurd. And that guy is like one of those speed Rubik's Cube solving people. The guys that can like do it in 10 seconds.
This is your analysis?
Yeah. And I don't know what is applicable about that to football.
Can you read cover 2 on the fly, though, son?
So I don't know what it is, right? But intuitively, I am working on the
Scouts would say,
basis that if you can solve a Rubik's Cube in 10 seconds, your brain functions on a level that should provide some use
Do you
to
think
the
that would
football
help
field.
reading coverages on the fly? Like,
It has to do something,
They
right?
started at 2, rotated to 3,
If
and now
you're-
I'm running a curl. And
Look, every one of us has talked to football players where you're like, that guy takes 10 seconds to figure out like what his own name is, right? There's a degree to which you are just too dumb to be a useful, plus level player, right? The cogs in your brain, they're turning, but they're going too slow to ever like propel you
it's
at
reaction.
a high speed.
Football's a reaction
No,
game.
there's thought involved in it. It's just you need the thought to be fast enough for it to be useful. So I'm working on the basis that if you can do that, like your wheels that thing is spinning. The RPMs in there are doing something useful. I'm just saying. In addition, I'm not saying that on its own would be good,
and he's
right?
got some good
but
football
if
ability.
he's a height, weight, speed freak,
Plus a Rubik's Cube.
plus he can solve a Rubik's Cube in 10 seconds, he's got to be good, right? No?
Yeah, definitely. I'm also, we talked about the Eagles tight end group. Ranking tight ends this year was painful.
Why are there none? Why is there such a dearth of these guys in the NFL?
They're not. There's just a lot of teams with multiple. Like the Bucks have Gronk, O.J. Howard, and Cameron Brate.
So it's like
right? And then the Redskins, Washington football team, I did it once. Shoot. The Washington football team, Jeremy Sprinkle, Richard Rodgers, Marcus Baugh, Logan Thomas.
Right.
Still, Sprinkle
it's like-
graded in the 40s last year. So the Patriots have nobody, the Panthers have nobody, the Bengals have nobody, and a lot of teams have multiple.
It's like 50% of society's wealth is tied up in 5% of the rich people.
It's tight ends this year.
Right.
That's tight ends in the NFL.
50% of all the tight ends in the NFL
Are
are
with
tied
the Eagles,
up by 3 teams.
The Bucks. There's a Kittle and a Kelsey that are just in a different world, and then the Bucks have a bunch. The Eagles have a bunch. The Browns have some guys. Like they're just all congested.
Fair enough.
So-
Can we talk about the Alex Smith thing as well?
Yeah, he's on the football team.
He's been activated.
It's
And
impressive.
already, that's like one of the most insane comebacks in NFL history.
It is.
Like, I know that you won't have, despite me telling you, but people should go and watch the Project 11 documentary that ESPN did. Steve hasn't seen it, but you should go watch it.
You don't know if I haven't.
I will bet you right now $1,000 that you have not watched that, despite me telling you to go watch it.
I haven't.
Right.
I have no time to go watch documentaries.
So I knew that he had the bad injury, the bad leg break, and there were complications, and he got an infection and blah, blah. And these are all just sort of things that wash over you in the general newscape of the NFL. But when you watch that video or watch the documentary and you see how bad it got, like at one point there was like a 24-hour stretch where 2 different flesh-eating bacteria infections had taken hold, right? And they were like chasing this infection through his body. There's no like, hey, if you're eating, don't watch this. Like, it's already in your brain at this point. But they were like chasing these 2 infections for like a 24-hour period. They were genuinely thinking that they were going to have to amputate his leg. At one point, his wife asked his doctor, they were like, if it was your leg, what would you do? And she said, amputate it. Like, if it was mine, cut it off. It's done. So by the time they finally got this thing under control, when you get rid of these flesh-eating bacteria, you have to like debride the area and basically just chop out the dead flesh. When they had got that finished, they were like shin to knee down to the bone of that entire leg cut off, right? The leg wasn't a leg anymore. It was like, it was barely functional. So he had to have these grafts of muscle. And getting back to the point where you were able to like have a normal life, walk around, run, play with your kids, that would be an amazing comeback. To go beyond that and to get cleared for professional football at the highest level is insane. If he plays a snap this season, don't even think about giving comeback player of the year to anybody else.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely absurd that guy has gone from that position to legitimately they are clearing him to have a no restrictions, full contact, training camp. He's good to go.
I can't believe that's even was his goal. Like, did he actually,
Right.
after all that, you're just like, all right, I've made a lot of money, had a nice career and all that stuff. Like, just
and everybody
around
around
him
him
wants
was,
to play.
yeah, everyone around him was talking about like, hey, we're just going to get, walking, right? That was their
Right.
goal. And he's like, no, I'm coming back to the NFL.
Crazy scenario. Alex Smith, and he's been a good NFL quarterback, a very distinct, on the conservative end, NFL quarterback. I don't know if Washington wants to, do they want him to be the starter in the future? Because they have to know, they have to figure out what they got in Dwayne Haskins.
The only way you're going to want him starting is if Dwayne Haskins is a disaster and you have to go back. So I don't think so. But it's the other thing, I have to get this off my chest. I didn't want to tweet it because it's like taking a shot at the guy. But, nobody listens to this. We're good. It's just between you and me. Brian Baldinger tweeted something like, or it was on TV. He said, Alex Smith has made every single football team he's been on better. As a rookie, Alex Smith threw 1 touchdown, 11 interceptions, and had a passer rating in the 40s, right? This comeback is one of the greatest stories in NFL history, but we don't need to dress it up with bullshit. He was not made every team he's been on better. As a rookie, he made the 49ers worse.
I appreciate your growth. Others around the company should be watching you as a beacon of light.
I actually had
to handle social media.
I had the tweet half composed and had to click the X and get rid of it.
We have separate chats for that, where if you're going to be snarky and just a jerk in general, we're trying to be better at that as a company. And I appreciate you saving it for the podcast instead. Yeah. Baldy.
Yeah, so look, the story speaks for itself. Don't add untruths to it. He hasn't.
He's been a pretty good quarterback. That's it.
He's made most teams he's been on better, but certainly not everyone.
One.
Not that one.
You got him.
1 touchdown, 11 interceptions.
You got Baldy. You got him. Anyway.
Yeah.
The rest of this Washington football team here.
Yeah.
The receivers, other than McLaurin, poor.
Yes.
The tight ends, among the worst in the league.
Yes.
The offensive line, they traded Trent Williams. He wasn't there last year anyway, but we've got either Cornelius Lucas, who I love as a 6'9" swing tackle. I like the 6'9", 6'10" guys. Guys that I'm taller than, but they're close to me.
You're taller than a 6'9" guy?
Definitely. Cornelius Lucas, he's a good swing tackle, but he probably shouldn't be the starting left tackle. Sadiq Charles, their 4th-round pick, probably shouldn't be the starting left tackle. Jerron Christian, their 3rd-round pick from 2018. So they have some questions at left tackle. Morgan Moses took a step back at right tackle. Brandon Scherf is good at guard. that's pretty much it. They have a whole bunch of guys that I kind of liked coming out of college, though. Chase Rollier and Wes Schweitzer. I mean, I liked those guys coming out of college. They haven't played great in the NFL level, so it's not a good offensive line.
I mean, certainly the left side appears to be a problem, like on paper.
Yeah.
I mean, so the most interesting thing, obviously, with these teams is the young quarterback, right? Dwayne Haskins. Haskins, I think, gets a bad rap, right? He didn't play as much as some of these other rookie quarterbacks, and I don't know if that is part of it. And when he did play, it was ugly. But I think people are writing off Haskins versus Daniel Jones or Kyler Murray or even a Gardner Minshew and saying he's not at that caliber. I don't know that we've seen anything to say that's true. Their overall PFF grades, the entire group was almost in the same area, right? They were all mid-60s.
It was the construction of the grade.
Right, sure. The construction of the grade and the supporting cast around each one of them is different and all this sort of stuff. So I'm not saying that that's the be-all and end-all, right? But one point is the overall grade was in the same ballpark as these other guys. Two, the fact that he didn't get on the field so soon, right? I don't think is this idea that he was inherently like bad at picking up an NFL offense. That was Jay Gruden's offense, which is notoriously difficult for quarterbacks to pick up. Alex Smith, who learned like a different offense every 6 weeks of his career for like 9 straight seasons, took a while to pick up Jay Gruden's offense. That offense is not a quarterback-friendly offense to learn, particularly for a rookie who, is coming out already behind the 8 ball as a quarterback that didn't have, a massive load of starting experience in college. So this guy is new to the position, new to learning all this kind of stuff anyway, and is thrown into one of the most complicated offenses in the NFL to learn. So the idea that he took a while to get it, I don't think should be held against him. And then when he finally did get on the field, his first couple of performances were horrendous, right? But he very quickly started to play a lot better. Like the back end of this performance was way better than the front end. So I'm not saying that it's a guarantee that he's going to be way better next year, but in the worlds of the Daniel Joneses, why are we skewing so positive on Daniel Jones and so negative on Dwayne Haskins? Is my question.
It's the way things were constructed. So I would say, Haskins had, I think it was the worst, he had the second highest percentage of negatively graded plays. Dwayne Haskins. He had a low percentage of positively graded plays. However, on those negatives, they were mostly just misses. He did not have a high percentage of turnover-worthy plays.
Correct.
And despite, I think it was 5.
Had a very low rate of
turnover-worthy
plays.
Very low. But he had, 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. The actual interceptions that he threw really weren't on him. It was this Alex Smithian conservative type of look. However, he did miss a high percentage of throws. Of the things that are most stable, it's the negatives, okay? And I would say that we skewed differently because the positives were low too. Daniel Jones had more noticeable positives that offset the negatives, and that's where a lot of the perception comes from.
But Dwayne Haskins' big-time throw rate was as high, if not higher, than
a lot of those fell incomplete. He had the Panthers game where his 3 best throws all fell incomplete.
Right. Well, so for most of the season, it was like Terry McLaurin making all their quarterbacks look good, right? Then suddenly Dwayne Haskins shows up and starts playing like a stud. Like Terry McLaurin drops this like 40-yard bomb right into his hands. My point overall with this, though, is that you're actually backing up, is that he was better than than people are giving him credit for, right? He was better than his statistics show. I think he's shown enough to be in that category with the Daniel Joneses and the Kyler Murrays and the Minshews, where there's more positive than negative to look at.
Oh, and there's still plenty to see. My issue with Haskins coming out, I compared him to my boy Sam Bradford, who when you give him a beautiful, clean pocket, will make beautiful NFL throws. He'll throw one of the best-looking dig routes in the NFL. He'll throw the skinny post. He'll do all these things, right? He'll do all these NFL-type things. But much like Sam Bradford, isn't going to create a whole lot outside structure, isn't going to create outside the pocket, and doesn't necessarily have this natural feel for playmaking. Now, all that said, Haskins had a couple nice plays like that last year, but I think overall he needs a really nice situation. So while we talked about Drew Lock, second-year quarterback who's in a nice situation to figure out what he is with speed all over the place in Denver, I don't think in Washington how much are we going to learn from Haskins behind a poor offensive line and only Terry McLaurin to throw to. They need incredible development from the rest of their receiving core, the offensive line, one of these tight ends to step up, and then coming out of this year, you might say, hey, we've got a better feel for what Haskins is.
So the thing that jumps out when you watch his tape is it's easy to get carried away with it, but his arm talent is like legit. I think a lot of people love that about Kyler Murray, but I think Haskins is right there. Like there are some plays where
I think
he
you see the
absolutely
elbow
fires it in.
I think you see the elbow motion, which just looks better. I don't know.
For Murray?
For Haskins.
I
don't know if his actual
Oh, dude, it is. No.
velocity is great.
You watch some of the plays from last year. Like his problem is he's got a bit of the that issue where he doesn't want to let it go until he sees it. As opposed to the guys that see it coming and throw it before it's actually open.
And Ohio State's offense helped.
Right. He wants to see it open before he throws it. But he's got the arm to get it there once he does. Like there's a bunch of plays last season where when he sees it and lets rip, like he is firing in a bullet that some of these other guys don't have the capacity to do that. So I'm excited about his arm talent. I think what we saw from him last year, given that situation, was actually pretty encouraging. I agree that this year there's a lot of things working against him that aren't working against some of these other guys, so it's a concern. But I mean, I'm kind of encouraged by Haskins.
Well, we'll learn a little bit more, but I don't know if it'll be enough with Haskins this year. Defensively, we talked about the D-line carrying them. Chase Young, he's awesome. He's a friend of the show. Between Chase Young, Montez Sweat still had some developing to do. It's much better if he's got the complementary pieces. Ryan Kerrigan is still going strong, huh?
Ryan Kerrigan and Adrian Peterson.
And Adrian Peterson's the running back. By the way, offensively, and we got to mention Antonio Gibson too, running back / wide receiver. I mean, if we're talking about a weapon to maybe step up, he could be.
What do you think this backfield looks like? Not that we care about running backs, but
Adrian Peterson,
because
early downs.
Surely he's not going to go like all season be the bell cow.
I like Bryce Love. I feel like Bryce Love could be that guy in a random year. Has like 100 carries at 7 yards a pop.
Yeah.
Just like breaks a couple big plays.
Bryce Love feels like the kind of back that could be. We talk about Philip Lindsay breaking the system a little bit not breaking the system, breaking the numbers little bit like Jamal Charles does. Bryce Love has the kind of speed to do that, right?
Yeah.
That where you hit a gap so fast that you don't get contacted, and suddenly your yards before contact goes through the roof, and it looks like it's the offensive line doing a great job, but actually your running back is just fast as hell. I can see Bryce Love doing that. That'll be really intriguing because he's another one of those guys that had that 1 year in college that was crazy good and then got hurt and disappeared off the radar essentially.
So I think moving to the defense, Jack Del Rio's the defensive coordinator. He doesn't really have a distinct style defensively. It's kind of like classic old school 4-3. They mix up coverages. I don't think his defenses have ever been great. They've been good at, like in Jacksonville, they were really good at stopping the run when he was the head coach there. And then in Denver, they were good at getting torched against good offenses. And then Wade Phillips took over and they got better. I mean, so there's nothing like, here's what he's going to bring to this defense. And it's going to be tough with Young. And like, how are you going to get all these guys on the field at the same time? Kerrigan's an edge rusher, right? Yeah. Chase Young's an edge rusher. Montez Sweat, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen and Matt Ioannidis on the inside. I mean, they've got 6 legitimate defensive linemen that they have to rotate in, which is great. But the linebacking core has question marks in the secondary. Fabian Moreau, Kendall Fuller, Jimmy Moreland, the projected starting front three, the starting three with Ronald Darby in the mix. I love taking shots on Darby every single year while he's, trying to get back to form. But, man, there's a lot of questions on the back end, I think, for the Washington football team.
The Darby signing could be huge because he has the potential at least to be a high-end starting cornerback. And, injuries have derailed him and that kind of stuff. And, again, I think he's another guy that the scheme didn't necessarily help him out for a while. So as a let's take a shot on this, that's absolutely a great idea. They get Kendall Fuller back from his time in Kansas City.
There's a lot of guys that have at least played well before.
Yeah, and even Kendall Fuller's another interesting one because his best play has come from the slot, and they're probably going to need him to play outside just because they don't have better options. Like Aaron Colvin was a disaster the last time he had to play. I'm still intrigued by Greg Stroman, who'll hang around on this roster. I think he has starting ability. But, generally on paper, either some people need to, turn it around or this is going to be a weakness.
I think if they do play more too high looks, you got Landon Collins back there. That's kind of where he's shown well. Too high, but like working downhill, quarters type stuff. I mean, they've got a bunch of guys that have played well previously. We liked Jimmy Moreland coming out, playing the slot. I mean, there's just too many question marks there. I think there's a pretty distinct difference between the top 2 teams in the East and the bottom 2 teams in the East.
Yeah.
The Giants could surprise. I have less faith in Washington.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the stylistic. Look, even when Haskins was at Ohio State, with all those playmakers, he put up good stats. He didn't have a high percentage of PFF positively graded throws. I don't know that Haskins is a huge value add type of quarterback. Like, he's going to go carry a team. Like, Daniel Jones could go carry a team for short spurts because of his aggressiveness throwing the ball. So when you give him that supporting cast, they could, good things can happen. I think with Haskins, it's more, okay, he can avoid mistakes. And when you're just avoiding mistakes and you don't have guys to throw to, I don't think you have exciting offense. So if either team is going to make a move, I feel better about the Giants.
I don't know. I think Haskins, so he's weird. He's going to, I don't know. I'm trying to comp him to a quarterback that fits this kind of mold.
Sam Bradford.
No. And I can't come up with a good one. A guy that's sort of, he has a lot of negatives and doesn't have that many positives, but they're all the sort of, it's the narrow range ones that he misses out on, right? So it's a lot of minor negatives that miss. Doesn't actually put the ball in harm's way that much. And then the positives that he has, there aren't that many of them, but the ones that he has are actually big. So he skews big-time throw heavy, but doesn't skew positive rate heavy. He's not picking up as many 0.5s, right? So when you look last year, his big-time throw rate, I think, was better than every other rookie quarterback, albeit on a smaller sample size. His average depth of target was higher than any other rookie quarterback, and by like half a yard to most of them. So I think he's aggressive enough to be good. It's a question of whether his propensity to miss throws is going to be enough to like cap him.
Again, that's my most concerning number, is the high percentage of negatives,
right?
Which generally stays pretty consistent.
Sure, but even then, like I think that's workable if you're not going to put the ball in harm's way as much, because that's kind of what Carson Wentz is, right? It's like your down-to-down accuracy is never going to be great, but if you make enough big end plays and don't make really bad plays, we can work with it.
Yeah.
Cam Newton thing as well, right? It's like you're never going to be the most efficient quarterback in the world, but if we can offset that with some other stuff, we're okay. I think there's a way for Haskins to do that. It's like you're never going to be Drew Brees on a down-to-down basis, but if we can get some of this other stuff consistently working, we're good.
All right, so who you got last in the division? Giants or Washington?
Probably Washington.
All right, I'll also take Washington last. Picking in the top 10 and perhaps looking at one of those quarterbacks, I think. I mean, I really think that's the reality here. I don't hate Haskins.
It sounds like you hate Haskins.
But I think they might be in the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields discussion next year.
I mean, yeah.
That's it, Sam. We're done.
Anyone that ends up picking number one overall,
they should be in the discussion.
Well, they should be in the discussion, and their quarterback probably didn't play well enough for them not to be.
I think Washington's roster might have them.
I think, put it this way, right? If Washington have a shot at Lawrence and Fields, they like Haskins probably didn't play well enough to prevent them being in the discussion.
And Chase Young, as great as he is, did not turn the franchise around.
And won't. But if Haskins played well enough Haskins played well enough to keep them away from a Lawrence or a Fields, they're probably not in their discussion for them anyway in terms of like finishing position.
All right. That'll do it. NFC East is in the books. Don't forget, PFF.com. We've got our new college football product, CFB25. You get 25% off. This is a brand new college football product, never before released in history. Nobody's ever done this, Sam. And then the preseason NFL draft guide for 2021, all part of your PFF Edge or Elite package. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday with another division preview.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.